the house is full, and it's full almost on ARC time. So we are 10 minutes off. I think we're going to make up for this. Again, I'm very privileged that Minister from South Sudan is going to chair this session, and I'm actually going to turn this over to the Minister.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Although I'm seeing only 2 or 3 ladies here, no, the room is occupied by gentlemen. I think after this beautiful and nice dinner which we had after a while, we come to our nice and young man from one of the giants of Africa, Nigeria. He's a young man full of energy, and is going to talk about greasing the wheels of a regional integration, which is infrastructure as a catalyst for trade, innovation, and growth in Africa. So it is very important that we listen to him. And then, as I say, I think it is one of the most important topics, that is greasing the wheel of regional integration, as we started from the morning that we were talking about integration. I think infrastructure is one of the pillars for this. So as our young man, very dedicated in his work, that is Chuku, if it is the name, Chuku. Chuku is a lecturer at the Department of Economics, University of Ohio, Nigeria, and a microeconomic modeling consultant for the Africans. You see, he's very young, and now he's a consultant. If he becomes big, he will be what? More than a consultant. So, Development Bank, he holds a PhD in economics from the University of Manchester, UK, which was fully funded with fellowship from the federal government of Nigeria. He completed the bachelor's degree at the University of Ohio, where he merged with a first class and the university accreditation for that year. After a short time at the Central Bank of Nigeria, he proceeded to Simon Fraser University, Canada, where he obtained a master's degree in economics with fellowship from the graduate school at SFU, and the Nigerian government. Chuku was visiting scholar at the IMF African Department and has been involved in consulting, contract, research, jobs for AFDEB and AERC, IDR, United Nations University, WIDER, UNEP, and the Center for Environmental Economics and Policy in Africa. Among others, his primary research interest is in fiscal and monetary microeconomics with clients with the sense of finance and environment. His publications have appeared in reputed journals such as Defense and Peace Economics, Journal of African Economics, among others. And look, he is a well-learned man, well-educated, full of energy, still young, handsome. Thank you very much.
Please, may I have the slides on the screen? Professor Lema, I'd like to thank you very specially, and Witness and your team, Charles, for inviting us to this presentation. And I'd like to start by first offering apologies of my colleagues. Professor Akpanekbo is the Director General of West African Institute for Financial and Economic Management. They just had a board meeting, and he had to go do a follow-up in Dubai. He really wanted to be here, but he's not able to be here, unfortunately. Anthony Simpasa is the officer in charge of the macroeconomics, forecasting, and debt sustainability department at division at the African Development Bank. Until 2 weeks ago, he was supposed to be doing this presentation, and then all of a sudden he got this mission from the vice president. So he has to be in Abuja and Accra today. And so we've done a lot of consultation. So what you'll be hearing is really our thoughts put together in this presentation. Now, this paper is exactly the type of model that Professor Lema was talking about, where AERC has a collaborative research project. And this project is part of that project, a joint collaboration between the African Development Bank and the AERC. And so some projects were selected from that project, and this is one of them. So in this research, you see a little of evidence-based, and you see a little normative and positive economics. So we'll be talking about how to grease regional financial integration, the role that infrastructure plays as a catalyst for bridging, for integrating, for improving innovation, growth, and trade in sub-Saharan Africa. So here's the outline. I'll start by trying to build the context, and then we'll do a short diagnosis and prognosis of the state of infrastructure in Africa. And then we'll ask two very important questions. Has infrastructure played its catalytic role in Africa? And then we'll try and find out where infrastructure is working best. We'll look at the different regional economic communities and try to identify where infrastructure is working best. The idea is to get a kind of flying G's leader that will provide the motivation for other regions to. And then we'll talk about some issues, some important issues. What are the key challenges? What are the methods, strategies that work? And we'll have some points, some 3 key points we can take away. The key to intra-regional trade is infrastructure. So our overall message is simple. It's to fast-track infrastructure integration to promote cross-border trade and investment and improve countries' productivity and to raise regional output and competitiveness. That's a summary of the message we are going to be talking about. Now, you agree that there's an agreement that there should be regional integration until this morning when we started getting questions that, but why do we really have to integrate? And that's that's a question with a lot of merit. But in spite of the fact that majority of us agree that there should be more integration, it's not clear exactly what this means for sub-Saharan Africa. It's not clear exactly how we can go about this integration and the extent to which regional integration of infrastructure can help to improve incomes, growth, and productivity. And that is what we focus on in this paper. So, but before we go and focus on these 3 main issues, we need to, there are some important distinctions we would like to clarify. Now, there's a difference between hard and soft infrastructure, and I believe you're aware about this. And so the former is the stock of all the fiscal amenities that support the society and the economy. And the soft infrastructure is those non-tangible mechanisms, the governance mechanisms, the regulatory frameworks that help to integrate infrastructure. And the kind of integration we're talking about here is both for soft and for hard infrastructure. There's also the question of the quality and quantity of infrastructure to integrate. But we need to define what regional infrastructure integration means. And so if there's a project that involves physical, if there's any physical project or policies that have any significant cross-border effect, then you can think about that project as a regional project if it has any significant cross-border effect. Now, by that definition, it means that national infrastructure endowments, for example, the seaports or the airport you have, even in the center of a country, is part of the regional integration process. And this morning we had questions about which one first. Is it national interest or regional interest? And it seems that the two are complementary, because as you build infrastructure at the national level, that's the building block for integrating regional infrastructure. So the large portion of national infrastructure is considered to be the building blocks for regional infrastructure. So what's the problem? Now, if you look at, senior network members like Benon, Nduli, they've done serious work on this, and they've shown that you agree that there's been a lot of useful effort by regional economic communities to integrate. But it seems that that integration effort has only had a marginal effect on economic outcomes, for example, GDP growth and income and innovation. So that's the problem. Why does it seem that all the effort we've made towards regional integration is having only a marginal impact? Well, one possible explanation could be that it is because these regional integration efforts have not been accompanied by commensurate integration of infrastructure. And that's what we try to investigate in this paper. So what is our aim? Well, there are three main things we aim to achieve here. The first is to assess the extent to which infrastructure integration can facilitate or can serve as a catalyst for income improvement in Africa, for trade, and for productivity growth. And then we try to identify the regions in Africa, and the regional economic communities where infrastructure is working more excellently than other regions. And the idea is so that we can learn something from those regions. And thirdly, we try to use some normative, using experience, anecdotal evidence to learn from other regions or from other places what works, strategies that work for regional integration. So in the next few slides, we're going to be seeing both positive economics, which is based on, facts, testable facts, and normative kind of economics, where we use experience and anecdotal evidence or subjective opinion to inform our recommendations. So now, what we're going to learn at the end, I'm just giving you a foretaste, is we're going to, because we do disaggregation by infrastructure sectors, we're going to understand which of the different sectors of infrastructure, there are four of them we look at, has the most significant impact on economic outcomes. Is it ICT, is it trade, is it electricity, or water resources? Also, by benchmarking infrastructure according to regional economic blocks, we are able to identify where infrastructure is working best. Okay, so let's do some diagnostics of Africa's infrastructure endowment. And so there was a very useful collaboration between the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the AUC, and the African Development Bank, and they came together and put up this document, the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, PIDA. And this PIDA contains the master plan for infrastructure integration in the entire region. So this is an example of what coordination can do at a neutral central level from the top to bottom. But if we do a cost-free benchmarking of Africa's infrastructure in relation to other parts of the world, then it may not be politically correct to say that the state of Africa's infrastructure endowment is abysmal. And I know that this chart may not be very easy to see, but I have highlighted two areas. These two highlighted rows show you how the situation is. In terms of, the situation is worse for electricity generation. Electricity generation by 1 million people in Africa is about half the next region, which is South Asia, and about 1/10 of the power generation in Europe. So there's a lot of gap, and there's a lot of catching up to do. The situation is, however, not as severe for ICT, because you can see from here the density of mobile telephones per 100% is about 74, which is close to 84 in South Asia and other regions. But this statistics mask the regional differences that you see in, for example, EAC or ECOWAS or in SADC. And in the next chart, in the next table, we'll show some of these differences. You'll see, if you look at this infrastructure endowment according to regional economic communities, you'll find that it appears that the East African community is behind in terms of infrastructure endowment. But this, and SADC is several multiples above other regions in infrastructure endowment. But in spite of, as for the other regions, we can't tell exactly, we can't rank them in terms of which ones are doing better in infrastructure. But we know for sure that SADC has better integrated infrastructure than the other regions. The East African community, however, has done better in terms of water and sanitation endowment. So, but it's not all doom. There's good news. The thing is that there's evidence now that the return on investment on infrastructure in Africa is about the highest in the whole world comparatively. And there's a recent study at the AFDB that shows that most of the private sector firms that ventured into infrastructure, for example, in the ICT and energy, have reported significant value addition in terms of balance sheet improvement. So now this table you see at the estimated cost of bridging the infrastructure gap, and this is from PIDA, the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. So now the 3 decades, the outlook from 2012 to 2040 has an estimated $360 billion financial requirement to bridge the infrastructure gap in Africa. But I mean, that's an ambitious amount to look for in a very short period. So there's a PAP, which is the Priority Action Plan. This PAP is like a 10-year action program which tries to make this more practical. And what we've done is to say that is to estimate the financial cost of bridging infrastructure gap at 67 billion USD, and this is the distribution by sector. So you see that energy and transport sector have about 95% of this cost. But as we're going to show later in the study, in the research we've done, this ranking, this apportionment may not necessarily be the optimal if we were to study this more correctly. But you see, by region, most of the fractions go to Central Africa and East Africa. About two-thirds of all of this budget goes to Central Africa and East Africa, which are relatively lagging behind in terms of infrastructure integration. So here's the map of the master plan for integrating infrastructure according to the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. And you see, this for the electricity, the idea is to integrate most of the hydropower projects into one pool, so that countries can draw from a central pool. And for the transport network, the idea is to connect the major consumption centers to the major production centers, and to link up most petroleum pipelines in the region. That's what you see this chart. This is the ICT network, which is mainly for fiber optic connections around the entire continent. And this is the water connection network, which deals more or less with multi-purpose type dams that you can use for irrigation and water systems. Okay, so we're asking this important question. I mean, if you have to justify regional integration of infrastructure in Africa, we need to ask and answer this question: how much has infrastructure played its catalytic role in Africa? And we'll try and identify three different kinds of roles that infrastructure can play. The first one is what we call the role of infrastructure as a Keynesian catalyst. Now, what this really is the role that infrastructure expenditures play in terms of improving employment levels, in terms of driving growth and output. So the more money you spend to build infrastructure, you generate employment by spending more money. You improve people's incomes by spending more money. And so the multiplier effect from spending money on building and integrating infrastructure could be experienced at the downstream and upstream levels. Now, typically, it's recommended that most countries should budget about 6% of GDP and spend on infrastructure integration. But from the statistics, we see the average expenditure on infrastructure in Africa is around 3%. So there's not enough infrastructure expenditure for most African countries. Now, let's see what the data says. Now, what we've plotted here is a scatter plot of the Africa Infrastructure Development Index. This is an index computed by the African Development Bank, and it has 4 different components, and it contains 9 indicators. And what you have here is GDP per capita. So we see indeed that more infrastructure, greater levels of infrastructure is associated with higher levels of per capita income. And you see some outliers here: South Africa, Seychelles, and Mauritius. So indeed, I mean, if we were to interpret this literally, it means that infrastructure does help to improve incomes in Africa. So that's one justification if you're asking the question, why integrate infrastructure? Now, this is a scatter of African Infrastructure Development Index and employment levels in population. And this chart is rather surprising, because we would have thought that the higher the stocks of the infrastructure index, the higher should be the level of employment to population. But what we see here, I mean, at best could be a flat line across, or even negative. So it seems that infrastructure improvements or development may not have necessarily brought about the kind of employment generation we're talking about. But this is only a literal interpretation, because this is a scatter plot of the two. So we have established that infrastructure does help to improve income, and but we're not sure exactly what it does to employment levels. But we can think of infrastructure in its role as a Ricardian catalyst. Now, what this is infrastructure's role in improving in trade facilitation, in reducing the distribution margins. So the idea is that infrastructure can have a double virtue of sharpening terms of trade. So that because you have better integrated infrastructure, the cost of exports fall. And then the cost of imports at the same time falls. So with more infrastructure, there's more importation, and at the same time, there's more exports. And there's better competitiveness, there's more participation by even small firms in the global market, in the regional market, if you like. In the next chart, I'm going to show you what the data and statistics says about the role of infrastructure in trade facilitation. Now, here's a plot of Africa's infrastructure development index and trade, total trade in GDP. The relationship doesn't seem to be very strong after all. It seems that more infrastructure is positive as we expect, but we're going to go back to proper causal analysis of this. So we're not sure exactly if more infrastructure has led to greater intra-regional trade in Africa. But we can be more sure here that better infrastructure endowments have led to trade facilitation, better trade facilitation. On this horizontal axis, we have the cost to export per container. So this is the cost of exporting, the average cost of exporting one container from a country, and this is the transport infrastructure composite. And we see that the more infrastructure you have, the more integrated infrastructure is, the lower is the cost to export 1 unit of container. So infrastructure integration does help to reduce distribution margin. So the last one we'll talk about is the role of infrastructure as a new classical catalyst. And this has to do with the endogenous factors. In other words, if you have infrastructure in an economy, then by itself, it promotes productivity, innovation in an economy. So this is what the statistics say. This is TFP growth. We got TFP growth from UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization. And so this is total factor productivity growth for African countries, and this is ICT infrastructure. And you see that countries with higher, regions with higher levels of ICT have greater TFP growth level. And this too, so this tells us something about the role of infrastructure in spurring innovation in Africa. On this axis, you have the number of patent applications by African countries, and here we have ICT infrastructure composite. So you see, countries that have more infrastructure have many more patent applications. I mean, South Africa is there as an outlier, but you see this relationship is positive. That more ICT infrastructure, is associated with higher levels of patent applications from domestic countries. Okay, so we did some causal analysis, and I won't talk too much about that, but I want to show you just one point I've highlighted. Now, these are the different sectors of infrastructure. And we did a simple regression on the GDP per capita and this infrastructure and some control variables which we have omitted. And what we find is that the ICT subsector seems to have the strongest impact, multiply effect on outcome, on GDP per capita. So incomes, with greater levels of ICT infrastructure, it seems that incomes improve the fastest with more. And then the ranking is such that it's ICT and then transport, energy, and water. So the next important question we ask is, where is infrastructure working best among the regional economic communities? What we do to achieve this, we want to unbundle, the results we showed before is masking the differences in the regional economic communities. So we want to unbundle these regional differences in impact among the regs. What we did was to try and interact the infrastructure variable with the regional economic community dummies and look for the marginal effects at different levels of infrastructure development. Now this chart, I'll tell you, this chart, what is here are this is aggregate infrastructure index, the African infrastructure index at different levels. And this the marginal impact for the different regional economic blocks. So, I mean, we can learn something from here. At infrastructure levels below 21, you can see that the impact of infrastructure on economic improvement is relatively clustered. I mean, you can't see the differences too much. But as infrastructure starts to get more integrated and higher, then you see these differences. And what is particularly interesting is that the EAC seems to have, and EAC and SADC, they have the strongest, higher than the regional average multiplier effects of infrastructure on the rest of the economy. And this would inform one of the recommendations we make. As for trade, the relationships are not very strong. the relationship is stronger for CEMAC and for ECOWAS. And for TFP, we see that in EAC has the strongest impact of infrastructure on productivity growth. So we'd like to talk about some issues in Africa's infrastructure integration. And one of the main issues are the key challenges. We want to identify the key challenges in Africa's infrastructure integration. And one of the key challenges is the topographical differences, the geographical and topographical diversity, which implies that any infrastructure, you cannot use one kind of infrastructure for the entire region. I mean, there are 8 different geographical regions in Africa, from the Sahel to the Savannah to the Ethiopian high hills to the Swahili watersides. So the different kinds of roads, different kinds of infrastructure is required for, and this is a major challenge, how to integrate infrastructure across this kind of geographical different areas. And the next thing is how to do proper cost-benefit analysis. So you want to build a road that cuts across the entire East African community. What's the cost-benefit analysis? What's the distributional implication of the equity implication? What are the impacts on the environment, on displacement, on migration, on communicable diseases, and pollution? And so this is one challenge, that if we can have credible cost-benefit analysis, then those kind of acrimonies that come from the distributional inequity that some countries seem to think that they suffer when they do cross-border projects will probably be sorted in this kind of environment. And this is why the role of neutral bodies like the African Development Bank and the African Union is very important, because then they serve as an officiating body to provide this unifying standard and do this cost-benefit analysis to show where the gains and the costs should come from. So another important question is, how should infrastructure integration be advanced in Africa? Should it be market-led or institution-led? And I mean, our team, we tend to favor a combination of the two approaches, both a market-led approach and an institutional-led approach. And I mean, we shouldn't think of driving infrastructure integration completely by the market-led approach, because the volumes of trade, intra-regional trade, although it's improving, but the volumes are not high enough to drive infrastructure integration through the market means. So if you were to drive infrastructure by only allowing the flow of trade to drive this, then you probably have a slow and lackluster infrastructure integration progress. Now, the next thing is that there's significant heterogeneity among countries in Africa. Some of them are resource-intensive countries, others are agricultural-intensive countries, some are both, some are mixed. So when are you going to have this coincidence, economic fundamentals that will coincide to make all of them invest in the same kind of project? Some are looking at shipping lines to ship the oil to the rest of the world, while others want to export in the region. So that's why we say that the market-led approach may not be the optimal approach. Rather, we recommend an institutional-based approach first. So the idea is to pursue a top-down, government-led, and market-creating approach to infrastructure integration in Africa. So now we are rethinking infrastructure integration, and there's this idea about inverse infrastructure. Now, inverse infrastructure is like moving away from the old-fashioned traditional infrastructure provision, where the government or some big utility company comes and provides all this infrastructure that cuts across the entire region. Inverse infrastructure is going the other way around, where you allow some mushroom-sized small firms, individuals, and small companies to provide infrastructure, which eventually develops into a local, regional, and even global infrastructure. Examples of this kind of inverse infrastructure mechanism is the use of Wikipedia and Google, where so it's for policy to identify the areas where you have inverse infrastructure developing, just small mushroom-sized small networks, and then try to support these networks to build up to bigger infrastructure, which can now get integrated in the region. Okay, so this is one of our last slides. We want to talk about some methods that work. So you can drive infrastructure integration by incentivization or by coordination, as we have been talking about here. Now, the US is often presented as a typical example of a region that drives infrastructure integration through incentivization. Now, the idea is that the federal government comes and provides at the macro level some incentives for the local municipalities and states to connect to infrastructure. For example, you can come at the macro level and provide a road that just cuts across the entire country through the forest, for example. So it's left for the states and the local municipalities to connect to this macro level incentive. There could also be incentives from a financial point of view where you have this big fund at the AU or AFDB level, and countries that are interested to pursue projects of infrastructure integration projects can access with some incentives or have some technical support or administrative support. So incentivization may not have been the approach that Africa is using, but it has been shown to work elsewhere, and it's something that that should be thought about, how to provide a macro level type framework that motivates nations and states to connect to the global infrastructure. And with this one, there needs to be perhaps an African Public Utility Commission that will have the role of providing regulatory and social oversight functions so that you protect against consumer manipulation and unhealthy monopolistic competition. The next approach, which is more common that Africa has been using, is the coordination method. And this is like what the EU region is. And this, usually you see that Germany has integrated most of its infrastructure to the rest of Europe using this coordination method. And what this coordination does is that you have vertical and horizontal interactions between local, state level, and national governments. And so with this kind of interactions and consensus building, a master plan for infrastructure integration is provided. And that's what PIDA is, the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. Those charts we showed you where they came out of coordination and consultation from national and Pan-African institutions. So in conclusion, there are three key takeaways from this study that we present. The first one is that our findings tell us something about the different sectors of infrastructure and which ones are more important. So we see that the ICT sector, ICT infrastructure seems to have the strongest impact on economic outcomes. So if we're to interpret that literally, we'll recommend that infrastructure integration projects in Africa should be prioritized in this order. So ICT infrastructure should have the strongest priority these days, and followed by transport infrastructure, electricity infrastructure, and then water infrastructure. And I'm glad that the president of the Farmers Institution was here, and he was talking very seriously about how that robotics, the artificial intelligence will soon take over farming, even farming. So ICT seems to be key area that infrastructure integration needs to happen. Now, secondly, we find that SADC, infrastructure integration seems to be working best in the Southern African Development Commission. And so this is like an example that other regional, so we can find out what is it they're doing differently that is making infrastructure integration work stronger or better in that region. And this can be something for other regions to perhaps emulate or learn. And one way to rethink infrastructure integration is to switch from the old-fashioned traditional top-bottom approach where the government or a big utility company provides the infrastructure and gets it to move across, to this mushroom-sized inverse infrastructure where you allow infrastructure to develop at the individual small levels, and then from there they go up to the regional and even the global level. I'd like to thank you very much for your kind attention.
I think we have to clap very big clap for our young man who is presenting their very well. Now after that, we come to one of our giants also, Mr. Brian Homik Board, who is former Deputy Managing Director of Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Economic and Finance in Benin. So you are most welcome to comment. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie Dr Choukou pour sa présentation qui a, ma foi, essayé d'apporter le lubrifiant pour les mécanismes de l'intégration régionale, c'est sûr qu'on aura besoin encore de beaucoup d'autres lubrifiants pour faire huiler la machine. Alors, le Dr Choukou a axé sa présentation essentiellement sur 4 ou 5 domaines. Les points importants qu'il a essayé de rappeler, et comme vous le savez, il a rappelé le rôle important des infrastructures dans l'intégration régionale nécessaire à la réalisation des grands objectifs de l'Afrique, nécessaire à la transformation économique, à la création de la richesse. Il a ensuite souligné le fait que malgré les progrès réalisés dans certaines régions en matière d'intégration économique, financière, monétaire, il semble que les efforts et progrès ne semblent n'avoir qu'un impact marginal sur la promotion de l'intégration régionale, le commerce et la croissance. Il souligne que probablement l'une des explications de cet impact marginal pourrait être le fait que les progrès n'ont pas été accompagnés des efforts proportionnels pour intégrer les infrastructures physiques. Il a dans un deuxième temps fait le diagnostic et évoqué les perspectives, notamment des 3 prochaines décennies, en matière de dotation en infrastructure. Une question essentielle à laquelle il a essayé de répondre, c'est le rôle fonctionnel joué par l'infrastructure en Afrique. Est-ce que l'infrastructure a joué un rôle fonctionnel en Afrique? Dans son exposé, il a quand même trouvé 3 rôles. Un rôle en matière de revenus et de l'emploi, le rôle en matière de facilitation du commerce et en 3e point, le rôle dans la productivité et l'innovation. Quelques défis, quelques problèmes sont liés à l'intégration par les infrastructures en Afrique. Il a cité pêle-mêle les défis. Il a par exemple rappelé les conflits endogènes qui ont besoin d'être résolus pour réussir l'intégration par l'infrastructure et entre autres l'une des questions importantes pour les décideurs sur l'intégration régionale est de savoir comment l'intégration des infrastructures devrait être menée. Faut-il la mener selon l'approche axée sur le marché ou l'approche dirigée par les institutions? L'étude de Dr Choukou suggère les 2 approches, la combinaison des 2 approches. Bien évidemment, l'analyse empirique au point 5 a essayé de conclure à partir des résultats de l'analyse que dans les secteurs des infrastructures, c'est le secteur des TIC qui a l'effet multiplicateur le plus élevé et qu'il faudra désormais accorder beaucoup plus d'attention à ce secteur. Bien évidemment, dans son classement, il y a les TIC, il y a les transports, il y a l'électricité et enfin l'eau. Bien sûr, l'intégration par les infrastructures devrait être faite selon ce classement, mais il y a des communautés régionales qui ont connu, comparativement à d'autres, plus de succès et la SADC a été citée. Donc voilà, en gros, pour aller vite, un peu le condensé de la présentation de Dr Choukou. Maintenant, il y a quand même des sujets qui préoccupent et pour lesquels nous devrons poursuivre la réflexion. Il est clair que, à partir de la littérature et tout ce que nous avons dit depuis ce matin, qu'aucun pays ne peut se développer sans accès à des infrastructures qui fonctionnent correctement. Le développement des infrastructures est donc indispensable. Et les défis qu'on devrait attaquer devraient nous amener vraiment à réfléchir pour lever les goulots d'étranglement. Entre autres, le présentateur a cité la diversité géographique et topologique, voyez-vous, les différences significatives dans les types et spécifications appropriées. Mais à côté de ces différences de conditions initiales, il est peut-être important d'insister sur la coordination, il l'a fait, la coordination et une consultation efficace entre les différentes parties prenantes. L'accent, me semble-t-il, n'est pas suffisamment mis sur les problématiques essentielles, comme les barrières naturelles et humaines, qui constituent aussi des obstacles à une meilleure intégration régionale et qui se réfère au fait que l'Afrique est subdivisée en plusieurs espaces économiques, comprenant de nombreux pays, nous le disons, dépourvus de littoral ou figurant parmi ce que nous appelons les PMA. Alors, ces pays sont en outre dispersés dans des organisations régionales et sous-régionales. Problème de coordination et d'efficacité dans les interventions. Alors, il existe aussi un grand nombre de contraintes, notamment le manque d'harmonisation des politiques. Le manque d'harmonisation des politiques régionales, le manque d'harmonisation des réglementations et des procédures. Nous pouvons avancer, entre autres contraintes, en termes d'efficacité des capacités institutionnelles, administratives et financières de gouvernance, n'est-ce pas, à mener à bien les projets de l'intégration d'infrastructures. En revenant au thème même de notre session, l'infrastructure a été subdivisée en 4 composantes. Le présentateur nous l'a subdivisé en 4 composantes. Et pour le présentateur, on a classé, par exemple, dans les infrastructures, les NTIC, en premier lieu, les transports, l'énergie et l'eau. Mais il aurait été intéressant de voir comment chacune de ces composantes-là constitue un catalyseur pour le commerce, par exemple, pour l'innovation et pour la croissance, pour le développement, pour faire court. Parce que nous parlons d'intégration, mais au bout, c'est le développement. Alors, il est vrai, déjà dès le départ, le présentateur a limité, il a parlé, il a souhaité parler de l'infrastructure en général. Alors, la question c'est comment l'Afrique peut exploiter le potentiel des infrastructures transfrontalières pour éliminer les goulots d'étranglement. Les infrastructures transfrontalières, il nous a donné des exemples, mais au niveau de l'exécution, de la mise en œuvre, ce n'est pas toujours aisé. Nous avons dit, nous avons des pays qui n'ont pas accès au littoral, donc il y a des problèmes de facilitation des échanges des biens et services. Alors, les ITF, une réponse efficace à certains obstacles majeurs qui entravent le développement et l'intégration, les corridors régionaux de transport, en termes de création d'emplois, offrent quand même un potentiel. Il faut aussi, en s'attaquant, bien évidemment, nous avons déjà parlé, je n'insiste pas là-dessus, des problèmes liés au chevauchement des CER qui auraient permis de contribuer à aplanir les difficultés d'intégration régionale. Mais quand nous parlons d'infrastructures, un des problèmes essentiels en Afrique, c'est la modernisation de l'existant, c'est l'entretien des infrastructures régionales existantes. Ce n'est pas toujours notre fort et il va falloir souligner ces questions-là, mettre le doigt sur là où ça fait mal. Les engagements régionaux ont besoin d'être harmonisés, je l'ai dit tantôt, que ce soit dans le cadre des accords bilatéraux ou multilatéraux, mais également, il ne faut pas oublier, moi je viens d'un pays de la CEDEAO, que nous sommes en train de vouloir faire avancer l'intégration dans des contextes qui n'étaient pas celui des années de création de certaines organisations, par exemple. En 1975, quand la CEDEAO naissait, on ne parlait pas des problèmes on ne parlait pas autant de problèmes de sécurité. Aujourd'hui, il va falloir promouvoir l'intégration dans un contexte de lutte pour la sécurité régionale, de lutte contre des groupes terroristes, de déstabilisation, etc. Et les agendas sécuritaires viennent parfois s'imposer aux agendas des travaux des organismes d'intégration régionale. Moi, je parle beaucoup plus de la CEDEAO. Un aspect est que certains pays sont développés plus que d'autres, et l'intégration suppose alors un certain partage de valeurs de solidarité. Hein, on a l'habitude de clamer la fraternité. Alors, l'intégration suppose la coopération, mais une coopération basée sur des résultats, basée sur le gagnant-gagnant. Un autre aspect, c'est que l'intégration également vient dans des contextes aujourd'hui où beaucoup d'énergie sont consacrées à régler des problèmes endogènes de gouvernance. Hein? Des situations conflictuelles au lendemain ou à l'approche des échéances électorales, où il faut encore régler des grèves n'en pas fini qui plombent l'évolution économique, et bien évidemment faire appel à des médiations. Donc voilà des contextes qui ne sont pas toujours propices à l'intégration. J'aime bien souligner, sans minimiser l'éthique, hein, mais il me semble important d'insister sur le transport, que ce soit le PIDA ou que ce soit d'ailleurs les objectifs des ODD. Le transport joue un rôle central. Sur les 17, 7 parlent des cibles qui concernent spécifiquement le transport urbain, le transport ruraux. Donc, il va falloir, ma foi, que le développement des infrastructures soit beaucoup plus de transport. J'entends, hein, l'accent soit un peu plus mis pour qu'on aille plus vers des lendemains meilleurs. Les statistiques, on les connaît, le docteur Choukou les a citées dans son travail. Hein, voyez-vous, je prends tout simplement le système ferroviaire africain. On en parle, on en reparle, mais ça fait déjà très longtemps. Quand vous venez dans la zone, juste notre zone, la zone CEDEAO, hein, ça fait déjà très longtemps qu'on voulait relier, mais on n'a jamais pu le faire. Donc, le contexte également, c'est ce qui, avec la Commission de l'Union africaine, on a signé un accord de grande portée qui s'inscrit dans le cadre de l'agenda 2063. Une vision de relier toutes les capitales africaines par un système de routes, de trains à grande vitesse. C'est très beau. Mais il faut y arriver, n'est-ce pas? Donc, ce qui devrait, et ça j'insiste dessus, favoriser le commerce intra-africain, qui est très faible. Et qu'est-ce que j'ajoute? Il faut améliorer les réseaux existants. Alors, comme pour le développement des infrastructures, il y a quand même d'autres questions. Le présentateur nous a situé les infrastructures en infrastructures techniques et non techniques, infrastructures physiques et institutionnelles. Ben, il va falloir, et nous n'avons pas le choix, mener de front ces infrastructures-là. Hein, et l'inefficacité des stratégies de développement du commerce des transports, des infrastructures, le manque de cohérence sont souvent le résultat d'une approche fragmentée. On en a parlé déjà un peu ce matin. Cette approche aussi fragmentée au coup par coup en matière d'élaboration de politique ne permet pas vraiment d'avancer comme on l'aurait voulu. Il faut relever donc ces défis, et le relever des défis exige un effort concerté vers la création d'un environnement propice aux investissements dans des infrastructures frontalières, la coordination efficace avec un large éventail de parties prenantes, que ce soit les gouvernements, le secteur privé et aujourd'hui tous les acteurs majeurs qui arrivent, et la priorisation des projets vraiment viables. Une harmonisation, une normalisation des cadres, c'est important, une répartition des coûts et avantages entre les pays participants. Voilà, on pourrait dire que le niveau des investissements nécessaires à la réalisation des projets d'infrastructure régionale de grande envergure dépasse bien évidemment les capacités des pays, et il faut nécessairement voir la question du financement de ces infrastructures et le rôle des PPP. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
I I thank you very much again. I think we give him louder slap. In fact, it is now your turn to ask questions, and I need direct questions, either to the presenter or the discussion. And if there are some few comments, it will be very few. But in fact, the presenter, I think, was trying to tell you that infrastructure can play a significant role in promoting regional integration with it more rapid and sustained growth in Africa. And even he gave you the aims of this integration, and also he took up some key challenges which he mentioned. At the same time, the approaches to make in order to make these things successful. And as well, he ended up by giving you key issues for you to take away. So we need as a discussion of this, based on what he said and what the discussion said, we put them together with what come from you, and I would advise the Secretariat to take points seriously so that these things will become our recommendations later on in whatever we see when we put all these things together. Now I will give chances to you. I will start from here, and then go here, and then go there. I'll take, first of all, 2 from here, 2 from here, 2 from here, then I come back again in rotation. Yes? Yeah? You mention your name, where you come from, and then be specific.
Okay. Thank you, Director of Ceremony. My name is Joel Sinsu. I come from Botswana. I'm Economic Advisor in the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry. Let me take this opportunity, Chair, to thank the presenters. I was happy to see Dr. Chukuchuku. Some years ago in 1992, I was at Manchester, and I'm glad to see a graduate from Manchester. Thank you very much. I just have one observation that I want to make about the issue of infrastructure. That is key to regional integration, and I totally agree with that assertion. I wanted to just point out that I think the key of infrastructure, the issue of infrastructure should be attached or connected to the development of regional value chains. As we mentioned this in the morning, the discussions we had in the morning, I think if we develop industries, especially developing industries where there's mutual benefit for the member states, what would be helpful would be to develop the regional value chain and see where member states can enter within that regional value chain. In our region there, in the Saku area, we know in South Africa, they are more developed in the automotive industry. In countries like Botswana and Namibia, we have leather. And in terms of the development of regional value chain in the automotive, is that if we develop the whole value chain for automotive development, then the countries such as Botswana and Namibia with leather, then they can contribute or enter the value chain by providing leather. And I think this discussion on the development of infrastructure would fit in the issue of regional value chain. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Again, near you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Un commentaire et 2 questions, rapidement. Il y a une expression en français qui dit « quand la route passe, le développement suit ». On pourrait dire « quand les infrastructures passent, l'intégration économique suit ». Et donc, j'associe ma voix aux remerciements et aux félicitations adressées aux présentateurs et aux discutants. au niveau des résultats, on peut noter que le meilleur élève, c'est la SADC, qui a réalisé les meilleures performances en termes de relations entre intégration régionale et infrastructure. Ma question est la suivante. Si dans la SADC, nous enlevons l'Afrique du Sud, est-ce que le résultat serait tout à fait défendable? Parce que l'Afrique du Sud, on peut dire que c'est un pays à revenu intermédiaire, pour ne pas dire un pays déjà industrialisé par rapport à l'ensemble des autres pays de la SADC. Ça, c'est la première question. La deuxième préoccupation, c'est par rapport aux recommandations. Je crois que, si j'ai bien compris, il y a deux voies. Il y a ce que vous avez appelé l'approche inverse, entre guillemets, qui voudrait qu'on passe des micro-projets vers une intégration plus grande, et puis l'approche traditionnelle qui passe des macro-projets, si on peut dire. La question, c'est que on aurait souhaité, en tout cas moi j'aurais souhaité, que vous fassiez la part entre le type d'infrastructure qui répond à chaque type. Parce que si nous prenons, et le discutant a parlé des rails par exemple, ou du rail, ce n'est qu'un macro-projet, n'est-ce pas? Et ce serait bon que, peut-être dans les réponses, vous puissiez nous dire, dans les types d'infrastructures, effectivement, au niveau de l'énergie, les pays du Sahel, ils ont du soleil. On ne va pas construire un barrage en RDC pour aller les alimenter. Vous comprenez, n'est-ce pas? Mais il y a d'autres types d'infrastructures qui ne peuvent pas répondre à cette classification régionale ou à cette typologie-là. La troisième préoccupation, c'est le financement. Et le discutant avait fini un peu par là. Il a dit PPP, je crois que tout le monde a compris que c'est partenariat public-privé. Et donc, il faut peut-être nous dire, là où le bas blesse, ou là où il y a la vraie difficulté, c'est de trouver des ressources pour financer nos projets d'infrastructure. Quelles sont les possibilités aujourd'hui offertes par le partenariat public-privé? Premier aspect. Il y a quelques années, je crois que ça existe encore, le partenariat pour le développement de l'Afrique qui devait être basé en Afrique du Sud au sein de l'Union africaine, n'est-ce pas? Comment vous avez appelé ça déjà? Le NEPAD, voilà. Je crois que le cheval de bataille ou l'objectif principal du NEPAD, c'était de développer les infrastructures. Où est-ce que nous en sommes? Et peut-être qu'il faut nous informer et voir si par rapport à l'objectif de développement des infrastructures, le NEPAD reste encore utile ou comment on peut le dynamiser. Merci.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I would like to repeat myself again that we don't want too much lecture. We need direct questions so that we give opportunity to some people to ask questions or to participate. So I think it is better that you ask questions and then we give chance to other people. And then I would like to remind you again also that if you have a question to the presenter, please. If you have a question to the presenter, direct it to the presenter. If you have a question to the discussion, direct it to him or to any of them actually. So this side, yeah?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. My name is Donald Dimari from Repoa, Tanzania. I have two contributions to make. One actually in form of a question directed to Dr. Chukshuku. And one is this issue of infrastructure, and particularly on transport infrastructure mix. Because you already say that there's a significant variation in geography, of course, and the cost for building transport infrastructure. Then it's perhaps high time we begin to think about the aviation industry as an alternative mean to fast-track movement of people and goods, light cargo, perishables, and food, and not to treat air transport as a luxury. Within Africa, of course, it's extremely expensive, takes much longer time. Perhaps Professor Chris Adam from Oxford flew here in a much shorter time than most of us from the neighboring countries. So I think this is a serious problem that we need to think as a strategic investment while we continue to build on railways and roads connecting each other. I would like to hear your views on this. The second point, I think also directed to you, has to do with trust, which is quite important among African countries if we are to integrate. And now we can begin to leverage on the ICT, for example. One case in point is the movement of people in particular is very restricted still, despite the fact that some of the countries have started to remove visa requirements. I once was traveling to Dakar, Senegal, I think a few years ago, and I asked them if I could get visa on arrival. They said, no, go to the French embassy to get the visa. So I'm an African, going to an African country, I have to get my visa from a European country. I think these kinds of barriers have to be addressed using ICT, for example, to, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is a question to Dr. Chuku and then a comment. And I would start, my name is Lual Deng from Ebony Center, South Sudan. Financial infrastructure, I think it should be part of the infrastructure, especially the banking sector across the continent. But my comment is when I look at the word rethinking, I thought the first point is not just for the current panelists, but also for the organizers, Professor Lima and his team, whereby it's really assumed that Africa as a country, not a continent. And if you assume that way, then you think in terms of like China or India, and then you can plan the infrastructure accordingly. And this is whereby the telecom comes in, not just ITC, but even telecom, where the telephone system has to be harmonized. And I agree with my colleague from Tanzania that also the question of air transport, even the airlines, these national airlines, they could be pooled into fewer one, and then ask countries to have equity in those airlines instead of every country try to get its own airline. The other is especially the power also, where countries which are endowed with the water, so they can provide hydropower. Countries which are endowed, the Sahara countries, for instance, the sunshine, they could also produce the solar energy, and it could be transported. So I think this is an area where we also need to look at it critically. But also for the researchers, I think maybe it is time for you to think, if we assume that Africa is a continent, then we now think in terms of macro, meso, and micro. And we see how this infrastructure cut across those three levels. Thank you.
At that side, and I would like to prepare a woman now. Yeah.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I have two questions, one to Dr. Chuku and one to the discussant. So for Dr. Chuku, when I look at the definition of the transport composite, it only captures roads, as others have commented. And when you look forward into the new technologies like drones and so on, which do not need this sort of physical infrastructure, how would you, in your analysis, adjust for these non-hardwired infrastructures, whether it's wireless electricity or drone technology for transport solutions? And then for the discussant, you mentioned the very important opportunities for public-private partnerships. The ICT sector was driven by the private sector. Do you see any opportunities, particularly in water and electricity, where the lessons learned could be adaptable to bring in more private investment for those sectors? Thank you.
My name is Tumisan Sfanda, and I'm from the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce. Mine is just a comment. I know the presenter indicated that the private sector has been involved in the IT sector when it comes to infrastructure development. but I think there is still need for more regular consultations with the private sector. This will give more space for the private sector to play a role in the integration process, and this will also boost the productive capacity. Then I also wanted to ask the presenter on the, when it comes to infrastructure development, the role of women, youth, and SMEs. I think that's an important aspect which needs to be considered as well.
That row again will have opportunity if there is a woman who would like a lady. If there is no lady, then I come here. This side, any question? Yes, the last one.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. My name is Karabo Marita. I come from Lesotho, and I would like to apologize for the absence of my Honorable Minister, Minister Aumane from the Ministry of Development Planning. I was supposed to have landed yesterday, but due to other commitments, I was not able to make it. Mine is basically just a comment on the infrastructure. In SADC, we have in transport protocol on transport, communications and meteorology, and there are standards which have been set, in order that we have harmonization. But ever since the protocol was signed in 1996, implementation has been very slow or minimal. So I think we also have to look into standards as well as harmonization and implementation, not just providing infrastructure. Are we able to harmonize within our own economic blocks? If we are, then, or if we are not able to do that, how then can we do it within, across the other economic blocks, for instance, COMESA, EAC, and SADC, and others? So I think we should take into consideration the issue of harmonization. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody again? Not this side? Then I go to this side, yeah? You? Yeah?
Ok. Cyril Onabode, Institut universitaire panafricain, Bénin. Puisqu'il a parlé des infrastructures, notamment, je veux aborder les transports et les rôles des corridors régionaux que nous avons. Surtout qu'il est aussi du Nigeria. Le corridor est Abidjan, Lagos, Cotonou. Par exemple, l'impact en termes régionaux. Est-ce que vous avez regardé ces aspects? Merci.
Thank you. My name is Walyangandu from Zambia. I need a clarification from Dr. Chuku. I had a certain amount of difficulty accepting the link you drew between infrastructure development and the cost of exports. What I saw, the graph I saw on the screen, for me was evidence that landlocked countries have higher export costs than those countries which are directly by the sea. Which is why if you looked at the graph, you saw countries like Zambia, Zimbabwe, Swaziland, the ones that are landlocked having higher costs than those that are by the sea. And that makes sense because if you look at the cost of inland transport in Africa, you find that it's extremely high. Take, for example, moving a container from Japan to Dar es Salaam is probably 3 times less than moving the same container from Dar es Salaam to Kapirimposh in central Zambia, just as an example. So for me, what you were showing wasn't, besides that, you also have roadblocks on the way, which we talked about, and you have to pay the policemen that you meet along the way. There are delays at the borders. When you compound all these, you find extremely high costs in the form of inland transportation costs. So for me, that's what that graph showed, rather than that there is a link between infrastructure development and the cost of exports.
Thank you. Yeah, that lady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Amna Bakar Abdul Rasul from Sudan, General Secretary for Fiscal and Financial Allocation Commission. My comments is for Mr. Chuku concerning that he covered the whole thing, but I think more analysis is needed concerning the setup of criteria for regional integration in infrastructure, and also the social impact of regional integration in infrastructure in Africa, and the sustainable development goals of development in Africa, how it can be served through the international integration of infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, that side, yes.
My name is Wilfred Mbowe from Tanzania. Maybe I should start by commending the presenter for a nice presentation. But I have two questions. One is that he mentioned that infrastructure works best in SADC, but I think that they could expand on that so that they can draw some lessons from that region. But also in the morning we're arguing that Africa should industrialize. But the way we are arguing here is that we should prioritize. And in my view, all the four infrastructures are important if we all want to go to industrializing the region. And the last one is related to what you are calling, as reflected in your title, greasing the wheels of the region. I would think that you should also capture issues of financing infrastructure in Africa. That is very key because that's the most important constraint in terms of explaining the poor development of infrastructure in the region. Thank you, Chair.
Again, I come, yes.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. My name is Masalila. I work for the Bank of Botswana. To Dr. Chuku, you had in one of your charts a scatter diagram that somehow suggested a negative correlation between infrastructure development and employment. Now, can't you go further and try and dissect that, especially when you are defining employment? Is it not the case that those countries which appear to have higher levels of employment, a lot of that is informal, such that now when you define infrastructure to include what you said were the softer elements, the high level of informal employment, if I'm right in that assumption, therefore, is a manifestation of lack of infrastructure development. Thank you.
Okay. This side, I want somebody from this side. You want? Yes. The last one. The last person. Yeah. The last person there behind. Kalas, you take over because he's looking there. Yeah, take over. Yeah. Take over.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me room to express myself.
No, it's supposed to man behind you. Give it to man behind you, I will come back to you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Tout à l'heure, ma question s'adresse à Choukou Choukou. Tout à l'heure, donc, dans sa présentation, il disait que l'intégration favorise le commerce transfrontalier, autant pour moi. Alors, moi je viens donc du Tchad. La question des défis sécuritaires est essentielle lorsque nous parlons de l'intégration sous-régionale. Vous voyez, le Tchad, depuis l'avènement par exemple de Boko Haram, le flux commercial entre le Tchad et le Cameroun est pratiquement réduit. Le flux commercial entre le Tchad et le Nigeria est complètement réduit. Lorsqu'on prend l'axe N'Djamena, par exemple, Bangui, est complètement réduit en termes de flux commercial. Cela est dû aux défis sécuritaires. Donc, dans l'analyse, je ne sais pas si Choukou a essayé pour montrer la contribution des infrastructures dans la promotion du commerce. Est-ce qu'il a contrôlé, par exemple, les questions dans les défis sécuritaires? Merci.
Oui, je m'appelle Deya El Bukhari, ministre de l'Emploi de la République islamique de Mauritanie. Ok, merci.
Okay.
Donc, j'aime bien poser une question à M. Choukou concernant les infrastructures. Comme vous le savez, ce qui réunit les pays, c'est les infrastructures. Donc, j'aimerais bien poser une question. Est-ce que pour intégrer l'Afrique, ça demande à créer de chemin de fer, comme disait le ministre béninois, son Excellence? Donc, je pose cette question. Est-ce que nous pouvons d'ailleurs travailler sur un chemin de fer qui relie toute l'Afrique? C'est comme ça on essaye d'être un peu à l'arrivée de cette intégration de l'Afrique. Merci. Je vous remercie.
Yes, this side. Yes.
My name is Tony Kwame from World Trade Center, Accra, in Ghana. My question is to Dr. Chukwu. From your presentation, I realize I tend to disagree with the notion that ICT can stand on its own, because any investment in ICT is also dependent on energy. And I know a lot of work has been done by founding fathers with the OAU and NEPAD, as they mentioned, that at the time the focus was on a regional integration investment in a big project like damming the Congo River in the DRC. And from the work that's been done, the figures that we all saw from presentation at previous workshops was that could provide enough electricity for the rest of Africa and could also provide irrigation within East Africa to provide food. From what I've heard from all my colleagues, don't you think more research should be done on big projects of that nature, and also to look at what caused the failure of other investments in joint projects like AERC and others? What caused it to fail? More research for us to see what caused the failure of airlines like AERC, so that we don't repeat such mistakes. Yeah.
One special question to the man I wanted before. Yes.
I have a question to Dr. Chukwu. It's in relation to budget, because everything that we speak, everything that we say lies along one word, budget. And in budget we have income, we have expenditure. In budget we have the running budget, we have the public investment budgets. In preparing the budgets, for example, do we take into account aspects of regional integration? Then if we don't take into consideration this aspect, means it's needless talking. Because if we want to talk about infrastructure that will benefit a particular region, we should start by putting it in our projects, in the budget, so that it should not be something that we're just speaking without a specific goal. For instance, if we say we want to maybe a road connecting, maybe, let's say for example, the CEMAC, maybe Cameroon and Congo, it is something that we need to budgetize. We need to put it as a priority. And now, who bears it? Is it Cameroon alone, or is it Congo, or both of them? So this is an aspect we should take into consideration. If not so, I don't see how we'll succeed if we don't plan properly. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you have participated a lot. So I will give the chance now to the discussion, because he has got few questions. Then we'll end up with Dr. Chukwu. Thank you.
C'est bon? Merci, Monsieur le Président. La moisson des interventions montre qu'il y a quand même assez de commentaires. Les questions, pour la plupart, ont été adressées à Dr. Chukwu. Je voudrais juste opiner sur la question de Madame par rapport à l'association du secteur privé. Vous savez que c'est une question, j'allais dire, relativement récente. Pendant longtemps, c'était l'affaire des gouvernants et de plus en plus, le secteur privé est associé dans le dialogue, associé dans la recherche des solutions et associé dans la recherche de financement. Parce que tout simplement, l'État, nos États, à travers les mécanismes classiques que vous connaissez, ont montré des limites. Je crois que c'est déjà important que ce soit des pas dans cette direction. Par rapport au passé, c'est heureux que de plus en plus, dans nos assises, que ce soit au niveau régional et le CREA en est une illustration. Hein. Au départ, les réunions, au départ, c'était pas beaucoup plus, les participants du secteur privé n'étaient pas nombreux. Donc, nous sommes dans la bonne voie, dans la réflexion, et c'est heureux que tout ce monde soit associé, toutes les parties prenantes, toutes les intelligences pour la recherche. N'oubliez pas que les projets, les grands projets dont nous parlons, d'infrastructures, les projets ont été élaborés à un moment où on n'avait pas connu un certain nombre de situations. Aujourd'hui, les projets sont réétudiés, réévalués, parce que ça coûte encore beaucoup plus cher. Hein, tous les projets qu'on a mis dans les tiroirs, et si on les ressort aujourd'hui, il faut les actualiser. Ensuite, il faut retrouver les financements dans un contexte où les investissements étrangers diminuent. Donc, voilà autant de problématiques qu'il faut régler. Mais je crois qu'on est sur la bonne voie. Président, voilà juste mon commentaire.
Okay, now we give the chance to Shuku to answer all these questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm also almost overwhelmed with the questions, but thank you. The questions were so useful. There's so many of them. And I've written them down. I'm going to send them across to our co-authors and I will discuss them. But I'd like to thank you very much, Jensen, the Manchester Old School, for the acknowledgement. And I like the idea you said about that infrastructure should be, integrated in such a way that they go along the value chain. So if you have inputs coming from a certain country, then you want to integrate infrastructure that brings those inputs to the next value chain and to the next value chain. And I believe that is one thing that will probably be one of our takeaways from here, that infrastructure integration should be driven along value chains. I agree with that absolutely. And about SADC, so is it possible that South Africa is driving the result that infrastructure seems to be more impactful in SADC? I believe that may be the case, but could it also be the case that the results we have for ECOWAS is driven by, for example, Nigeria, or the results we have for EAC is driven by, for example, Kenya? I think that's an area that requires more investigation, and we agree it's possible that this major players, this swing countries, I suppose to call them, may be driving the integration along this line. I like what Ramin said from Tanzania about aviation, that shouldn't we pay more attention in terms of transport on aviation? And I like aviation, but especially because of the geographical differences. But I've traveled around Europe a little, and I like the way that railways are so interconnected. You can almost go to any country, with rails. But it's true that the environment there is different because of the geographical and topographical differences. But aviation is surely one aspect to look at. But I'm not thinking about the technology involved, the cost, and in countries in West Africa, for example, where you have to move containers to the landlocked countries. I don't know how many containers you can easily move by aviation. Aviation can do light cargo through, but I think railways and road, for the level of development that Africa is at, is still the first stage before we move up to aviation. And you also talked about trust. That okay, you're traveling from Europe, and it's easier for you to come it's easier to travel from Europe to Africa than traveling around in Africa. And it's true, and the motivation and inspiration that Kenya has provided by granting visa on arrival to every African country is something that I believe policymakers can take back home and try to drive in their different countries. And besides, there's the African Union passport, which I believe the president of the African Development Bank has, and many presidents. I don't know how long it will take for every African to have a passport, but there's a project like that. I don't know what the future is. I know Freyna and the rest are working on at the AFDB, but that's surely a good step in terms of labor mobility across Africa. And I like the idea that when I was talking about, I never thought about this wireless infrastructure, drones, this kind of transport systems that don't necessarily depend on the traditional, top-down approach. But this is related to the point we're making about the inverse infrastructure, where you have individuals, small groups, developing infrastructure. I could have a drone network, and I'll send my drone to another individual who transports something. So these are new areas we can rethink infrastructure integration, where small individual firms, we integrate this kind of, instead of following from the government directed big one. I'll just jump to so Honorable Wani Wandu from Zambia. You said one of the charts looked that you actually rather interpret it as that the cost of transport for landlocked countries is more expensive. I'll agree partly. Because but what I may go back and do is to try and sort that difference and see if it was just landlocked, the cost of transport for export for landlocked countries. But I believe there's merit in that. It may be that's confounding that relationship we show there. So we'll have to look at that again. And yes, Tony, I agree, Tony, that we are recommending that we should prioritize ICT, but he's saying that, and rightly so, that ICT depends on electricity and power. So how do you reconcile this? I believe it's something so they need to go hand in hand. You couldn't invest so much in ICT without having electricity to drive that. And you're talking about budgeting, how to finance this, the cost. And that's why we are insisting that the role of neutral bodies like the African Union, the African Development Bank, to officiate this process. So if you have a thoroughly done cost-benefit analysis, we know what you stand to lose in terms of environmental degradation, in terms of population displacement. That is not done by either country, cross-border countries. You have a neutral body doing this. Then there can be more confidence in the process, in the amount of contribution in terms of financial contribution, the technical contribution that is required to drive the process. And I thank you. I know I've not covered all of this, but this is a lot of food for thought for us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very nice reply. Now, before I end up with this, let me thank the African Economic Research Consortium for this nice seminar which we are in now. And I would like to thank Dr. Suku, the presenter, and the discussion also. We have to thank them very much. And all of you also for participating in this discussion. I think you did nice. I think we are now trying to put things together. And my last comment is only development starts with infrastructure, actually. If we need development, we go for infrastructure. Being what? I think if you need development, you have to go for infrastructure. I quite agree, or even as mentioned by the man from Zambia, that bringing a cargo from Japan is less expensive than taking it inside into Zambia. It is because there are no good infrastructure. Because if we have good roads, fast train, I think it will be cheaper than bringing something from Japan, actually. So the best thing is, if Africans really want to unite themselves, they unite themselves by infrastructure development, which I think is more important than the other things. And it should be priority. Which one do we start? Is it roads? Is it ICT? Is it what? I think it depends on the policy which may be taken by the African leaders and try to concentrate on it. If they take it from time to time, we take one thing, concentrate on it, I think we'll be able to go do whatever we can do. But otherwise, thank you very much. We again give a loud applaud to our presenter. And to yourself, please. Thank you.
Okay, to the Honorable Minister for a very delightful chairing of the session also. Okay.